Hey everybody, tonight we are reading the beginning of Children of Midgard. This is a novel that I wrote that I've been talking about and looking forward to reading it with you guys. Each night I'm going to read a little bit until we make it all the way through. Tonight I'm going to read the beginning of it, planning on a certain number of chapters, but we'll see how my voice holds out. So, without any further ado, we'll begin. And I apologize for starting late, had some technical difficulties, but this is the first time I've done it, so thank you for bearing with me. All right, Children of Midgard, The Freyerton Saga, Volume 1, by Greg Garrison, for my father, who was a gentle giant. Day 1, Chapter 1, The Cruel Comedian. I discovered that the world is a strange place during math class when a bee started talking to me. Sure, I'd seen strange things before, but there's a big difference between normal strange and strange. Amakora, my grandmother, calls things like that screetin' strange. For example, there's a lady who's at the drugstore every time we go, and she's always in line. She's baldish and has hairy ears, and her eyes are huge. They look like they're pointing in opposite directions. Some kids say, Nanny Boda looks like Yoda, eyes popped out from drinking soda. I don't like those kids. I feel uncomfortable around people who look funny because it's hard not to stare. But if I look away when I walk past them, then I wonder if it makes them feel sad because I'm trying not to look at them. So I usually just try to look at them the way that I look at everybody, but since I think so hard about it every time, I bet it's probably pretty obvious that I'm uncomfortable. People like the drugstore lady are normal strange. A talking bee, on the other hand, is the other kind of strange. It's even stranger than that. It's the kind of strange that's not supposed to exist outside of movies and my comics and Joe's fantasy books, but it does anyway. I had no idea what the equation on the whiteboard meant. I didn't even know what it said because I wasn't paying attention to Miss Honeycutt or what she was writing. Instead, I was watching a yellow jacket. It's kind of hard to resist a distraction like that when it's kind of normal to see a bee, like spring or summer or even early fall. But this wasn't any of those. It was late December and there it was, a really big yellow jacket circling around my math teacher's head. In western North Carolina, there are never bees at that time of year, even when the temperature is 70-something and it's too warm for December. That's what the weather was like that day. It would have been hard enough to pay attention if nothing else was going on. For one thing, it was math class, and for another, this was the last day of school before winter break, and it would have been the perfect day to be outside. You add a bee in class to those two things, and learning is impossible. All of a sudden, like it knew I was watching it fly around, the yellow jacket shot straight at me, landed on my desk, and then hopped onto my pencil. I sat totally still, except for my fingers, which I sort of flicked at it, hoping that it would go away. Instead, it walked up my pencil to the eraser, shook itself a couple of times, and then took off and flew straight at my head. I swatted as it buzzed around my face. Then I heard this tinny, buzzy voice shout, Hey, I'm being low-key here. Hasn't your mother ever told you not to swat at a bee? That'll get you stung. I thought everybody knew that. Don't be an idiot, kid. I sat up, and I was a little embarrassed, wondering if this was a dream. But then I noticed that I could smell things, so I knew that it wasn't. I waited to see if the bee would say something else. Joe and I had made eye contact, and she gave me a look and a hand signal that said, Are you okay? She's my twin sister. I nodded to reassure her. Joe wasn't the only person to notice. Pendleton Pullman did too. He was my least favorite person in school, no, in the world. He was dumb, but smart in the way bullies are. And he'd managed to surround himself with kids who copied him. He insisted that everyone call him Pullman. Most kids did. Teachers refused to. Naturally, Pullman made fun of me. He made a scared face and pretended to cry. Jerk. Don't worry about that little rat, said the bee. He'll get his comeuppance in the end. I'm going to come a little closer. Don't panic. If you don't swat at me, I won't sting you, all right? The bee didn't wait for me to agree. He landed right on the rim of my upper ear. Fortunately, Miss Honeycutt was writing on the board, so I didn't have to explain the look of panic on my face. I tried not to move or scream. I love that you're working on rational numbers today, said the bee. His voice was a bit lower now and kind of gravelly. Of all days for me, a bee, to be talking to you, a human. It's when you're studying rational numbers. I mean, what could be more irrational than a kid actually believing that a bee is talking to him? It's days like this that make me love my work. Other than not swatting at the bee, I had no idea what to do. Should I just say nothing? Should I try to whisper really, really quietly so that no one could hear me but me? Should I think really, really hard to see if the bee could read minds? I thought as hard as I could. Nothing happened. So I tried to make my voice inaudible to everyone else and cover my mouth. Why are you here? Nice way to talk to me without getting noticed. I'm impressed. Anyway, I'm just here to amuse myself, really. Thought you guys might get a kick out of it, too. I've been watching you for a while, kid. Now it's your turn to watch me. The bee zipped up to the ceiling, and I could hear his voice clearly, like he was still in my ear. You can still hear me, right? Just nod if you can. I nodded. Good deal. You can hear me because I'm using air particles inside your ear to manipulate your eardrum directly. Makes it sound like I'm in your head. Weird, huh? Being a magic bee has its perks. Enjoy. Suddenly, my head was full of classical music. A piano and a violin went back and forth, up and down, fast as music gets. No one else acted like they heard it. I knew this song. I liked this song. We'd listened to it in music appreciation class. Its name came to me at the same moment that the yellow jacket turned and flew straight at Miss Honeycutt's glasses. The Flight of the Bumblebee. The bee darted at her this way and that like he was a dancer in a ballet. Music punctuated his lightning-fast jabs, swelling and falling as he zipped right at her and zipped away. Miss Honeycutt waved her arms at the bee and shook her head back and forth. He dodged and flew like he was toying with her. I tried not to enjoy myself because it seemed like a mean thing to do, but I've got to be honest. When I thought of how many times I'd had more homework in math class than any other subject, I stopped worrying about whether the bee was mean. This was fun. When the song whipped to a close, the bee flew out of sight. Miss Honeycutt was slightly disheveled, her shirt partly untucked and her hair a little bit messy. She stood up straight, tucked a few locks of her hair behind her ear, and looked right at me. I had this awful, weird feeling, like she knew I'd heard the bee. I thought the fun was over for the day until I heard the bee's voice inside my head again, speaking with even more excitement than before. Hey, Stephen, see that brownie by the window above the old lizard's desk? I wondered what kind of lunatic would talk about dessert in the middle of a crazy situation like this. I whispered, I don't know what you're talking about. There, the bee shouted. See him? Him? I thought. Then I saw what appeared to be a stick-thin person, the size of those little green army figurines, pushing against the lock on the window. The bee meant the magical creature brownie, not the cookie. I could hear it in my head, too, as it grunted and made strained noises in a voice that was super high-pitched, like the recording of a little kid that's being played back too fast. I saw another brownie climbing up from below, and a third crouching on the upper window frame. It lowered itself and dropped down to join the others. I could hear all three jabbering. They sounded like the mice from an old Disney princess movie Joe used to watch. The three brownies pushed on the window's lock. They grunted and strained and counted together. 1, 2, 3! They pushed the lock open and dropped to the windowsill. 2 more climbed up from the floor, and then all 5 got their hands under the window frame and opened it above their heads. Then music started playing in my head again. It was a different piece of music, bigger and louder and wilder. I felt like I was in a battle scene from a movie. Violins and woodwinds started playing, and then horns joined in, and they swelled. Then more horns joined and started playing the theme. Dum da da dum 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 da da dum 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 da da dum 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 da da dum. It was Elmer Fudd's Kilda Wabbit song from Looney Tunes, Ride of the Valkyries. All of a sudden, Thousands of bugs flew in through the window like a giant cloud full of wings. Honeybees and bumblebees and carpenter bees and hornets and wasps and dirt daubers and every other kind of nasty, stinging thing you could imagine. They were zooming through the air like tiny missiles, all aimed at Miss Honeycutt. I finally felt sorry for her and whispered my favorite cuss word under my breath. This joke was no longer funny. Miss Honeycutt was totally covered in crawling, buzzing bees, every square inch of her skin, hair, glasses, and clothes. More flew into the room and onto her, and she stumbled toward the window. I got up from my desk, threw my hands over my ears, and rushed over to Joe. The music was growing louder and louder. It became so loud it hurt. Then it suddenly stopped. "Joe, we need to get help," I said. "Obviously," she said. The classroom was chaotic. We were all out of our desks. Most kids were shoving their way toward the door. Miss Honeycutt lurched toward the window with her arms outstretched like a mummy covered in bees instead of bandages. When she reached it, a cloud of thick smoke appeared all round her. The smoke looked like it had come in through the window, pardon me. The smoke cloud grew and quickly filled the room. It smelled like burnt cotton candy. The air became hard to breathe. Most of the class had already left the classroom, and Joe and I started working our way toward the rectangle of light that was the doorway. Desks had been knocked around, and we were moving slowly. A girl cried out, "My leg! I can't walk! Somebody help!" Another was shrieking in the corner of the classroom. Her voice was high-pitched and ear-piercing. "That's Macy," said Joe, referring to the girl with a hurt leg, who was one of Joe's best friends. "We have to help her." She grabbed my hands, pulled me, and yelled, "We'll be right there, Macy." At the same time, Miss Honeycutt called out, "Sarah Lee, does anyone see Sarah Lee Higgins?" "I'm over here," screeched the tiny girl of the voice in the corner. "Stay where you are, Sarah Lee," said Miss Honeycutt. "I'm coming to get you." A bright jet of flame blasted the air near the front of the classroom. Sarah Lee screamed again. Miss Honeycutt called, "It's just me." I could hear the clink of the ball in an aerosol can, which Miss Honeycutt was shaking. Flames tore through the smoke again, a thin stream that waved back and forth in a fan pattern. The flames were followed by something that whooshed past us. A bee landed on my face. I swatted at it with my right hand. A wasp immediately stung it a few times. I felt something tickling my ear, and I instinctively swatted at that too. I felt stings up and down my right arm and screamed. I felt like my arm was on fire. Joe continued to pull my left hand, and I had a hard time moving because my arm hurt. "Stephen, are you okay?" asked Joe. "I got stung a bunch," I said. "Let's hurry," she said. The talking yellowjack whispered, "I told you not to swat, kid. You'd better be careful and listen to your betters." Then he laughed and hissed words I didn't understand. "I'm Scabarn." The yellow jacket flew out of my ear and landed on my face, directly below my left eye. He started walking slowly across my cheek, using his stinger to tickle my skin. I didn't swat this time. "Good job, boy," the bee said. "You're learning." He dipped his stinger into my ears, drew a tiny wet line on my cheek, and said, "I think it's time you introduced me to your sister." "Leave her alone," I said quietly, trying not to sound like I was crying. "Leave who alone?" said Joe. Then she cried out, "Who said that?" "I just talked straight into her ear," said the yellow jacket. "I said that her brother's a crybaby, and it was fun to sting him." I said, "You won't believe me if I tell you, Joe. Let's just get out of here." My voice broke. We had reached Macy. The three of us were the only kids left in the classroom. Our principal, Mr. Martinez, was in the doorway. He called, "Does anyone need help?" Joe answered, "We do." Then she said, "We're here to help you, Macy." Macy sobbed, "Joe, it's my ankle." Tears were streaming down her cheeks as she said, "When everybody was pushing over earlier, I got knocked over and I felt my ankle go snap." Principal Martinez started yelling painfully. I glanced up and saw him in the doorway, waving his arms and trying to enter the classroom. A cloud of bees had formed to block him, and they were stinging him. "Stephen, help me," said Joe. She put one of Macy's arms over her shoulder, and I did the same with the other arm. I was glad that she was light and fun. She looked small and light, pardon me. She looks fun, growled the yellow jacket. I'll give you 1 minute to save her life. We'll see if you're better guardians than your father is. I wonder how many bee stings it takes to snuff out such a small life. What do you think? 50? 100? 500? The insects started laughing in a sickening way that sounded like the laughter of a madman filtered through honeycomb. Music exploded in my head again. It was loud and terrifying, an entire symphony blasting out 4 beats, followed by lightning-fast violins and a choir singing in another language that sounded like a chorus of angry demons. A heavy drum beat pounded through the music, and I could hear the voice of the talking yellow jacket. With each drum beat, he was whispering in a low growl, "Wrath, wrath, wrath, wrath." "We need to hurry," I yelled. We started carrying Macy toward the door. The yellow jacket's voice sounded like an extremely loud whisper as he said, 30 seconds. Hurry, children. Hurry." He started laughing again. The chorus became loud again. Bees were bouncing off my back and legs and head. They weren't stinging, but they were pounding me like a rain of BBs. Buzzing filled the air and became louder with each passing second. The yellow jacket was counting directly into my ear now. 23, 22, 21. The cloud of bees blocking Principal Martinez parted, and we reached him in the doorway. 18, 17. "Macy's hurt," Joe explained. "We have to hurry," I shouted. Mr. Martinez did not ask why. He did not have to. A solid, moving wall of stinging insects was behind us, floor to ceiling, wall to wall. After we pulled Macy into the hallway, we were able to move more quickly. "I'll carry her," said Mr. Martinez urgently. He lifted Macy off our shoulders into his arms. We started rushing toward the exit. We had almost reached it. The cruel comedian finished counting. 3, 2, 1. Then he growled, "I love a good laugh." As his laughter howled in my ears, a battalion of bees erupted through the classroom doorway. Bits of the door jamb exploded into the hallway like a bomb had gone off. Together, the insects did not buzz, they roared. Seconds before the bees could reach us, we hurried outside and slammed the exit closed. Joe and I had saved Macy's life. It was our first heroic act. That's the end of chapter 1. I'm going to pause for a minute and start a new video of chapter 2. I'll have a separate video for each chapter. And I want to real quick tell you what music you heard so you can look up it on Spotify if you want to. The first was Mirages by Joel Lissarides. The second was Yitzhak Perlman's version of The Flight of the Bumblebee by Rimsky-Korsakov. Then we had Max Richter and Daniel Hope playing Summer 3 from Richter's recomposed, Vivaldi recomposed, pardon me. Then we had Ride of the Valkyries by Wagner. Then we had Summer 3 again. Then we had the Dies Irae from Verdi's Requiem. Then we had an explosion. So there we go. Chapter 1. I'll be back in just a couple of minutes with chapter 2 once I save this video and figure out what to do next. All right? I'll talk to you guys momentarily. Thank you.